Alright, we're back, boys and girls, with another episode of the Not So Fucking Ordinary Show. And if you're new to the show and just joining for the very first time, what I'm doing is taking the time to dissect and reverse engineer people who I think are extraordinary. And what that means to me is they're excelling in different areas of life, whether that's in athletics, maybe they're into fitness, or they're climbing the corporate ladder and doing really well in that environment, or they're in entrepreneurship, or like my guest, Theo Bennett. He's a world-class leader and coach. Theo, how you doing?
Good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Doing very well. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Oh, mate, it's just a privilege to be here and talking to you. And thanks for being so open, first of all, because we met in the stairwell of this apartment building.
Yep.
And it was just like a brilliant natural connection.
Absolutely.
And I just appreciate your openness, mate.
Yeah, likewise. I want to thank you as well. Because like you said, we kind of met at random, had a little 5-minute conversation, which led to an additional conversation for 2 hours, and now we're here today diving in a little bit deeper. And just within that first interaction, I think you and I hit it off. You were a little more curious about me after that conversation. I was a little more curious about you, and so naturally we just had to link up and do a little bit of a deeper dive, and I'm glad we did.
Oh, mate, and thanks for using the words reverse engineer. I became an instant fan as soon as you said that.
Oh, there we go. There we go. All
All
right, we're already vibing.
We're in there.
We're already vibing. And I don't know about you, but after that conversation we had, I think it was last weekend, and we did a deeper dive for 2 hours or so. I stayed up and just kind of recapping all of the major points that we touched on in that conversation. The things that you brought up, the perspectives you had, the way you articulated them. It's like, this guy, I need to know more, and I need to share this with people. So again, I had to get you on the show, and I appreciate your openness and willingness to be on this show. And I think it's going to be a really good interview and episode for everyone that's watching. So before I dive deeper into your story and share what that looks like with everyone, I got to, of course, highlight the show sponsor, as always, Fit to Give, Minnesota-based company, providing stainless steel shaker bottles, protein shakers for all you fitness fanatics out there, and comes in a variety of colors. You can check them out at fittogive.org. And why it's near and dear to my heart is we're pushing a portion of the proceeds to not only local but national and international charities. So again, if you want to check out Fit to Give, you can check us out at fittogive.org. All right, Theo, are you ready for this?
Let's get into it.
All right, let's do it. So here's the question that really sets the tone. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pause myself. Let's jump into your story. Where are you from? Who is Theo Bennett? And how did you, get to the States?
It's like a 20-hour interview. But basically, I'm from New Zealand, and from a very small town in the middle of the North Island, a place called Tokorua. I'm the youngest of 3 brothers and a sister. And rugby has basically been the vehicle that's put me all around the world. So New Zealand is known for its rugby at the end of the day.
Yep.
And I literally grew up in a rugby house. So as our family was growing and the boys were getting bigger, and I'm youngest by 9 years.
Okay.
So I grew up witnessing my brothers playing rugby on the front lawn and playing with them. And even though they nurtured me, they gave me a lot of hard lessons.
Oh, I'm sure.
But as we grew, our house was kind of getting smaller. So then my father and my mother go to the local rugby club, which is a big deal in New Zealand. And they brought the hall from the rugby club. They attached it to the side of the house and built more bedrooms.
Oh, that's great.
And so, as a young kid, I grew up in half of a rugby club.
Wow.
And so, with all the lessons that my brothers gave me, they taught me things like being determined and having grit.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they taught me some skills and things as well. And I felt that it really installed the fact, looking back at it now, installed the fact how important storytelling is and how important our narrative is about who we are and who we identify with. And I'm just rambling a little bit, but this is pretty important.
Yeah, keep going.
I remember one of the first games I ever played in rugby. And my whole family, my 3 brothers, my sister, my mother, and my father were there, and they were watching me play.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like this.
Yeah.
And I went out there and I made tackle after tackle after tackle and got the ball and ran and I scored a try. And I remember sitting at the dinner table when they were talking about that game, my first game. And it set such a high expectation in me that that's what I've been searching for my whole life. Is that narrative to be re-spoken, that feeling of wanting to belong in a community, in a team, in a family. And by the time I was 7, my parents divorced, and I lived with my mum, and then all these things happened, and rugby was kind of like that savior part for me because I could be a part of a team, and I wasn't that good. I wasn't that good of a player, but I guess always seeing my brothers play, always hearing the narratives, always being involved in like an architectural framework because I was the smallest and the littlest. I think it gave me the ability to hear what people say and dissect that information. And that's kind of what formed the coaching me a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. And so my story is basically is that my family upbringing, until I was 7, really created the kind of person that I was. And independent of all the difficulties and adversity that I faced, being a really gritty, hard contact sport, and also having a family that created stories from that, created this form of resilience in me too. And so this begins my journey.
Yeah, I love that.
And so,
when did you start coaching?
I ended up fracturing my skull when I was about 20. And I was just fortunate with the club, and they offered me a position to coach kids and, stay in the game a little bit. So while I kind of dabbled in and out, I started coaching and fell in love with coaching. And I never really looked back. And so I'm 47 years old now. But starting coaching at 20 years old, it was full of experiment. It was full of like playing the game and being so close to it. So I had to transition from being an athlete into being a coach.
So what did you love about coaching right out of the get-go? Was it the fact that you had so much passion for the game, but now that you can't play at that high of a level, you still want to be connected to the sport, so coaching just naturally made sense, or was there something more to it? And there's no right or wrong answer, just curious.
I think it's more the belonging. It's like when you step there into that role, people look at you for something. And so for everybody it's different. And it was never necessarily, I'm going to have the best team to start with. Don't think it was that. I just thought about my mates, like my players. Straight away, I remember some of the first guys that I ever coached, they became my friends. And still are to this day.
That's great.
Now we're all older and we were so close in age, right?
Yeah.
So,
that was going to be my next question. What was the age group?
Yeah, it was under 16s.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was 20.
Yeah. So not that far off.
Oh, I ended up even dating one of the kids, one of the guys' sisters, you know what I mean? It just happened that way.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so how did you make your way over to the States? Was that early on in your coaching career, or was that more recent?
That was about 2006.
Okay.
So I went from New Zealand and I was playing touch rugby, which is kind of like flag football.
Sure.
In New Zealand, and I was going between New Zealand and Australia to play. And in Australia, I started coaching a local club. And they were the worst, man. We lost 47 games in a row. We got our ass kicked.
How many games in a season?
Oh, there's like 27, 26.
Okay.
Like
so it's pretty much 2 years of losing?
Yeah, like a year and a half. But and it's called Helensvale Hogs in Australia. And we got our ass kicked for a year and a half. But it kind of really gave me that sense of belonging again about almost being with my brothers, like in the family unit, And I would never turn my back on them. So we just had this great camaraderie. And it introduced me to process-based coaching over results-based coaching, almost.
Okay. What's the difference for myself and everyone watching?
Okay, so it's not about the wins. It's about the process to gain more proficiency at what you do.
Okay.
And so you can imagine, our first game, we lost like 125-0 against the best team in the competition, And I remember it was like probably 9 weeks, 12 weeks after, we played them again, and we lost by like 95-0. And we had this big party in the changing room because we managed to keep them under 100, right?
That's hilarious.
And so, you have to take your wins. Like, you can be getting thrashed, but it doesn't really matter. It's like, it comes down to still the same narrative that I coach by today. And it's led me to some great high performance units in the world. Is that the scoreline doesn't doesn't reflect anything. It's about who's the best learner. And like, as long as we have great learners, great attitudes, because attitudes determine situations. So no matter the adversity that you face, you've got to make sure that you're looking at it in the right way, so that as soon as that pressure gets alleviated, you can do something about it. At the moment that you drop your head is the moment that things start going backwards even further and further and further. And I mean, with Haag Theo at Helensville, you know, we had prizes for the best hit of the game. You know, we had celebrations if we can keep the opposite team scoreless for more than 3 minutes, and then it went 4 minutes, then it went 5.
Playing little games within the game, like that.
Like, you got to find something to hold on to.
Yeah. So continue to walk me through your coaching career, because I'm trying to get up to the point where you're becoming, you know, I guess a leadership consultant, if you will.
Okay. Well, basically after that, I got an opportunity to coach with the Australian Sevens. So Sevens rugby is one of the most fastest, furious sports in the world today.
Okay.
Like, it's hard because it's physical. You need endurance of like a 400-meter runner, if not an 800-meter runner.
Oh, wow.
But you got to be able to take hits, and it's for 14 minutes long. And you think it's not much, but it's a combination of like jiu-jitsu, volleyball, basketball, everything put together.
That's intense.
And you're going against some of the best human specimens and athletes of our time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, after coaching at Haag Theo, I kind of made an opportunity with the head coach for the Australian Sevens that were heading towards the Commonwealth Games. And I said to him, mate, I don't care if I've got to fill up your water bottles. And that's no plug against your water bottle. I don't care if I've got to fill up the water bottles or fucking, you know, carry your bags, but, you know, I really just love coaching, and I love being with the boys, and Sevens is a game I think I can coach. I didn't expect an email back, and he just goes, yeah, mate, no worries. and he gave me an interview, and in the interview I nailed it. But the thing is, I was a New Zealander living in Australia, and you'd never give me that job.
Yeah. So is Australian Sevens the name of a team, or is it the type of rugby?
The type of rugby.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was following.
Yeah. So rugby's in 15s and 7s.
Okay.
So 15 on one side and 7s on the other.
Okay.
And 7s is an Olympic sport.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I don't know much about rugby other
no,
than those guys are fucking nuts.
Yeah. It's good fun, right?
Yeah.
It's cool. And I realized that I couldn't progress there. And the head coach at the time, his name was Glenella, and he's a lovely guy. And he just said, mate, like, literally, like, fuck off, mate. Go and see the world, experience yourself, and you know, do things differently. Because here you're never going to get what you want. And within like a week, I broke the lease on my apartment, sold my car, got on a plane, took a contract in Kansas City, of all places, and started coaching there.
Wow.
And I coached a couple of seasons, 3 or 4 seasons there.
And was that the Kansas team? Was that like college or what kind of?
No, it was men's Division 1 at the time.
Okay.
For Kansas City Rugby Club.
Okay.
Yeah, so City they're called in Kansas, which was a great experience.
Yeah.
Met some great people. But there was a common theme though through, even to the last probably 4 years, like the amount of destruction as a leader and as a coach that I left behind me.
What do you mean by that?
Well, relationships that you kind of ruin.
Just because you were bouncing around a little bit for that string of years, or what?
No, it's because I didn't listen. And I think that's the big thing. Like, you have to listen to the people around you. And more importantly, there's a huge responsibility that a coach has. And I think that I thought I was too good for what I was doing at some stages.
Was it a combination of you having a certain level of ambition, wanting to climb to a certain level of coaching status, and so that's like what you were focusing on, and you weren't necessarily paying attention to building the relationships along the way, or was it something else?
I think it was more to do that I grew up trying to please my family and their vision of me, and to create that narrative of success. And you've got to remember, New Zealand has 5 million people. And like, we don't have many athletes to call on.
Right.
And so when you look at that, like, we have to care for every athlete. Like, every time you catch the ball, it means something. Every time that you make that tackle, it means something. Every time you score that try, it becomes the best try in the world. I mean, we're such a small population, we love to compete. And so then I arrive in the USA where rugby is a developing sport, and I bring that attitude with me. And I even took it to Brazil when I went to Brazil. Like, I've always carried it with me, and I didn't realize how much I wasn't listening and how much I wasn't nurturing.
When do you think you had that revelation? Was it when you came to Kansas, or was it sometime afterwards?
There was one recently at the Olympic Training Center, like last year.
Okay.
The US Olympic Training Center.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was definitely one in Brazil just before I left as well. It just been walking down the street and seeing a player that you've coached, and they look the other way, if not cross the other side of the road, because they don't want to talk to you.
Wow.
And then you realize everything that I thought I was, I'm just not.
And do you think people have that I guess view of you because of the style of coaching you had, or just like, were you a very intense leader? Were you someone who was just like no bullshit type of attitude, no excuses, like very, I guess, militaristic type of approach, yell in people's faces? Or was it just you would give people pretty much a cold shoulder and you would only talk to them when it was a command on the field?
My personal life was in turmoil for most of these opportunities. So then when I wasn't having those difficult conversations with players that I should be, I was distracted about survival because I pretty much bet on everything that I could to be in that position.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you have your Maslow's law. Like, I left all forms of security and, put myself in positions that a normal person would not go.
Right.
And even though the opportunity becomes there, but when you get there, it kind of like tears away a bit. And I think that, a few times in my career, I have ignored people and not had the right conversations when I should have, and not seen the things I should have. And ultimately, players can feel really bad about themselves. And that leads to things like depression and isolation.
Mm-hmm.
In the worst case scenario, which I'm a big advocate for, is when you suffer suicide in your teams. And it might not be directly because something that you've done, but it is definitely something that you do influence. And you could have a better culture so people stay alive. Like, I don't care if we win or we lose.
Mm-hmm.
I want the people that I coach, to be able to appreciate where they are, to feel like they can come and talk to you, to feel like they do belong in a group of people that would understand the differences between one another, right? Like, I think that's everything I drive towards in my high performance units now, and the teams I coach is that.
And I think that's a really important bridge to create for leaders to subordinates, or coaches to players, or managers to employees, whatever that situation is. I think that bridge connection is so important because it's very rare. It's very rare where I'll just say a leader to we'll just say a manager to an employee. Mm-hmm. We'll use that example. It's very rare where the employee can go to the manager with a personal situation, or express what's on top of their mind, or get some things off their chest because of the consequences that they perceive may occur. Or in your situation, a player approaching a coach, and you have this really tough sport, manly ass man. And of course, there's women's rugby as well, but in your particular situation, these hardcore guys, clearly they need to be able to have some sort of an outlet, and it's really difficult for them to go to their even manlier coach and express some of those, I don't want to say, I'll just say emotions, and kudos to you for being able to have the recognition, the self-awareness that, this is actually an important part of what I'm doing. Is it's important for me to create these relationships, and the only way to create these relationships is to give my players and those around me the opportunity to approach me and be in a vulnerable situation to communicate what's on top of their mind. Because I think that is extremely rare, very, very rare. Yeah. And it sounds like you had to kind of learn as you go, and in some cases learn the hard way, unfortunately, but at the same time, you got to give yourself a little bit of grace, because that's something that you can't, a 20-year-old when you first start coaching isn't really going to know that.
No, you don't know anything, like, right. Just like green. And just recently I've worked with the USA Women's Olympic Development Team.
For rugby?
For the women's team. And like, those girls are badass. Like, I
believe it. That's why I had to cover my ass. As I said then, I was like, I know there's some badass. I had to cover myself. So
I got mad respect for those girls, because what they put themselves through, because they're carrying that mantle. But everything that you're saying is absolutely correct. There is, and the word vulnerable gets thrown around a lot. And it's almost kind of like people shun away from the word vulnerability. And I try to just encourage people, and you have to approach every single person that you want to open up to you differently, or that has a problem. It's just saying, cut the crap and tell me what you think, because I'm not going to hold it against you for having an opinion.
Right.
It's the lack of opinion that causes problems, and the lack of expressing that opinion.
Yep.
So unless you're totally transparent, we're never really going to get anywhere, because honestly, I don't know who you are. I see you running around and playing, but are you playing the same way that you're acting right now? Because at the end of the day, a player will basically play how they live their lives. Is it explosive? Is it angry? Is it creative? Is it balanced? And then you try to take away what that player is. You try to mold them into something that they're not. The best place to learn about the player is what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And it's TJ, have an opinion, mate. You know what I mean? You have to have that, and you have to display it. Because when you walk over there and you start playing, I want you to play to the most comfort. I want you to express yourself, as much as you possibly can, because when you make those mistakes, then we will refine you into a role that will help everybody.
Right.
So be yourself first, and then we can start adjusting things. But until you're yourself, I can't fucking help you, mate. Sorry.
It's such a great correlation.
Yeah.
The player is the same person as who they are off the field.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. I like that. That's really good.
Well, I'm glad I made you day.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's what I'm gonna continue to think about. That's great.
But isn't it the same in business? If you've got to work together and you've got a sales team, and someone's doing dodgy stuff beside you, and they're not being transparent. Doesn't it make it hard to trust them? Doesn't it make it hard to build that bridge so you could get a common goal?
Right. Yeah, I think how I am kind of processing this, and the best way that I can verbalize it is, to me, character goes across all facets of life. I don't think there should be, this is who I am as a person and when I'm doing this activity versus this activity versus this activity. I'm talking about core, fundamental blocks of character. Who I am with my friends is a little different than when I'm with my mom. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about core, beliefs, values, characteristics. I think that should be pretty consistent across the board.
Yeah.
Are you a man or woman of integrity? Are you a man or woman of honesty? Are you a man or woman of transparency? Those type of things should be across the board.
Yeah,
to me. That's why I'm answering your question about the sales situation, because I've been a part of sales teams, the high performance sales teams at that, and I agree with you. Similar to a high performing salesperson to a high performing rugby player, who they are on the phone with the customer and how they treat that person is how they're going to treat someone outside of the workforce.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I just thought of something, but then it kind of flipped back on my head. But no, it's about this. We talk about character flaws, and sometimes you have to understand that there is a creation of that character, and there's a creation of when I can actually display what I think or my opinion and that comfort level. Because as a coach, it takes me a long time sometimes to break down a player to actually tell me what they think. And it comes from them maybe feeling secure in their family unit, or it comes down in their community, or the culture or value systems of previous work situations that's maybe given them stress. So, there's a fine line, I think, that we walk between wanting a great friendship and a work relationship, and then wanting to be a mentor, and then wanting to lead a team. There's no point leading a team if it doesn't want to be led.
Right.
You can't go in there with your little flag and stick it in the ground and say, follow me, troops, we're going this way.
Exactly.
Because people just sometimes they don't want to hear it. And probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned in leadership is about timing. It's about the right time to have the right conversation and the right frequency.
How do you often determine that? Is it just reading people's body languages, or what do you think you use, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, to read when the right time to approach that individual and to have that conversation, to ask whether or not they're going through this, and this?
I used to call it instinct, but as I've reverse engineered stuff, I've come to realize that it's the power of observation and the power of listening. And so the observation goes, in the whole context of this, is this the right conversation? In the whole context, is this person going to be comfortable talking to me? And is it going to be influential for that person to progress? And then listening to everything that's been said.
Gotcha.
Like, how you doing? Oh, I'm good. It's like, okay, just good.
Yeah.
You know, like how far do you want to lean? Like you talked about your coach the other day, how he leans into understanding because it makes you feel interested.
Yeah, which coincidentally I saw him yesterday for the first time in a very long time.
How amazing is that?
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Did you give him a big hug and say, thanks, buddy?
Yeah, we had a great conversation.
Yeah. Well, and you know, and another part of it too is you know, you're only as good as the followers that you create as a leader, and the followers create the leader. You got your head up your ass if you think that you're going to step anywhere and just be the leader. The leader, and especially an authentic leader in this case. It doesn't work that way. You need to be able to create, people will create an expectation for you. They will create an admiration for you as you develop how you work and how they see those things. It's not going to be instantaneous.
Right.
And, you know, talking about that team that we lost 37 games in a row and we get smacked. Like, I was the worst coach in the universe. But they made me, they gave me that place.
Yeah.
They gave me that opportunity to go. They would turn up the trainings and they would come. They wouldn't want to learn. But they gave me that opportunity, they gave me that freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. I wanna rewind a little bit because the observation and the listening, I don't wanna just blow by that because those two were really important, and I'm curious to know, like, how did you develop that skill to, first of all, recognize the importance of observing and then listening and understanding the right time to approach and to ask the right questions and to read that person's response and whether to say, today's not the day internally, or say, okay, I'm gonna kind of pry a little bit more, see if they open up as a person. Like that, there's so, I mean, the whole podcast could be about those two things because that's a very, very, very just rare set of skills, important set of skills, and I'm curious to know how you stumbled upon it. Is it something you read and you applied it, or something that you just started to develop as you continue your journey as a coach?
It's an experience that I've lived. If you can imagine it, it's the same, like everything's on the internet is algorithms, right? And so we're always assessing. Google's got all the Google Analytics and we do stuff and blah, blah, blah. And sales have got all these kind of stats that come out. Well, in rugby too, we have metrics. How fast is this guy running? How much is he lifting? How long can he endure this kind of intensity for? And we've taken our observation and we've looked at statistics. And so more that we do that, the less that we are observing. And so I'm kind of blessed with a coaching generation. When I started coaching, there was no laptop to give me statistics. I had to like read people. You know, I was in the middle of Kenya coaching sevens. I was in Fiji coaching sevens. You know, I was in the south of Brazil coaching sevens.
And we're not going to skip that. I still want to go from Kansas to the rest of your coaching.
Yeah, but I mean, cool. But it's we're spending so much time looking at statistics that we're losing the ability to be able to analyze people. And to take the opportunities. For example, in rugby, like I look at so much more than just what my players are doing. Like there's the timing of the game or the tempo. There's the personnel, both what we're doing and what we're going up against. I don't have to ask anybody for that kind of like power observation. I had to figure that out myself. And I recently got faced with a position where we had an analyst come in, and I could just see that automatically the minds of all the players were going, what I was doing, and they wanted to know. But they were in a position that it didn't really mean anything because they couldn't change what was going to happen in 2 weeks when they had to play. Like, I don't care how fucking fast you're running today, because in 2 weeks we're not going to change that. What's going to change is that we get the right information in your head, the right skills, and then for you to express yourself and focus on recovering and doing the right things. It's not about statistics, it's about observation. So that's where it kind of really kicked home for me.
I like that.
I'm the last of that kind of generation, I think. Or I won't be, but we're losing that part.
Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So let's go back to your coaching in Kansas, and how long did you coach in Kansas, and then what was after that?
2.5 years, and then I had a brief stint in a couple other places in the USA.
Okay. At a collegiate level, or
still at the first division level.
Okay.
Yeah, through Atlanta.
Yeah.
And then, I was married at the time, so I met a girl, got married and stuff, and we hooked back to Australia.
Okay.
And I started coaching like a local development team in Australia, and we spent 2 years approximately there.
Okay.
But I found out that like I had a bit of an injury, so yeah, because rugby has its demands. So I got degenerative back disease, and so my discs are slowly kind of wearing away.
Oh man.
And I kind of got faced with like a lot of being a reasonably good elite athlete, and then having this great prowess when I kind of played the game to a certain extent, and then having my physical abilities taken away from me, and I could have gone to the route of being on public health care for the rest of my life and having money, and I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It didn't feel right.
So was that back injury from when you were playing as a teenager?
Yeah, it was a combination of different, the way that I trained as well, and an injury here and there. But in a nutshell, it kind of really affected me. And I remember walking up a hill one day, and this bus was coming, and I'd just been to the counsellor that would sign off my papers to give me a sickness benefit for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And I couldn't sign the papers. And I had to go home and I had to have a conversation that that's not what I wanted to do. And I just wanted to step in front of this bus. And then I was just like, obviously I kept walking, right?
Yeah, thank God.
But then I was just like, if I'm willing to step in front of that bus, why wouldn't I step in front of every opportunity to live my dreams? Why wouldn't I just go after it, like in everything I could? Because it's done. And I got home and then started got on the emails and started looking around, and then ding, came this, someone said, hey, did you know that Brazil got the Olympics? And I was like, no. And did you know rugby was going to be in the Olympics this year? And I was like, no. And I went, ding, I want to coach Brazil for the first time that they've ever been in the Olympics. In Brazil, the first time, it's actually the second time, but rugby's been was reintroduced in 2016. I go, that's what I want to do. And so I went after it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, let me first say I'm super glad you didn't step in front of that bus.
Oh, me too.
Oh my God.
Oh, that bus would have came off second best, right?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
And so, I put everything on the line, and I found a small club in the south of Brazil, because the Brazilian Rugby Union, they weren't replying my emails, they weren't giving me any love. So I was like, well, I'm not taking no. So I got on a plane and went to the south of Brazil, and I started coaching like a little team in the south of Brazil. And
wow.
We had some very good development.
And was your wife with you at the time?
No, she ended up staying in the USA. But shortly after, I suffered a divorce through the middle of that, and we're just different people, and she's really happy with her life now.
Sure,
and, so she's really good. But it took me like a year to get the attention of the Brazilian Rugby Union. Had an interview at probably the worst time of my life. Like, I suffered so much isolation, and even though I had divorce, I met somebody 3 or 4 months after that, and then that really just wasn't the right relationship. And so again, personally, I really ramped up into that.
Yeah. Going through the tumbler,
created that turmoil, but I still nailed the interview, and I still got on a plane, and I still moved to São Paulo, and I still got in that environment, and I went for it.
That's amazing. What was your age at this time?
Oh shit, I don't know, I got secrets now. I'm about 32 or 33.
Okay.
But unfortunately, like I say, I got myself in the way. Like, 2016 was the objective, but I really wasn't prepared for that, to do that extra bit of sacrifice, because I'd already sacrificed so much, and it started taking its toll, and the relationship had to be dissolved. But it was only dissolved for a week with Brazil, and then I got on a plane and I flew to Kenya.
Wow.
Because Kenya had a team that was looking at the World Cup qualifiers, and I knew somebody that knew somebody, and they said, you'll be a great fit for the job.
Yeah.
So I got on a plane and went to Kenya. And it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But I was like, I wanted to coach the highest level.
Zoom meetings didn't exist back then, or
no, man. It would be amazing if it did. Solve a lot of problems, right?
Yeah. It's racking on miles.
Yeah, but just in being there, I got to know another guy who is now the head coach for the US Olympic team.
Oh wow, that's incredible.
And he's seen my journey in different parts all the way through that. And we didn't know what was going to become of it at the time. But it didn't work out in Kenya, so then I ended up returning back to Brazil with my tail between my legs and a bit lost. And then I found Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's a new twist to the story.
Yeah, and so, I was cleaning bathrooms at this gym in Brazil, and Marcelo Oliveira is a teacher down there and with Gracie Barra, and he was just like, you should come to Jiu-Jitsu. And I was like, no. It's like, you should come. And I was like, no. And then one day I had to, and I tried, and I was like a fish to water. And I spent 4 years training and competing down there.
Wow.
And that taught me a lot about myself, because, I'm a foreigner in Brazil, running around with these guys, and they wanted to take my head off all the time.
Oh, sure. What an experience, though.
Yeah, it was great for me, because I knew that if I could earn the respect for myself, more importantly, from the people that were in the dojo, on the mats, if I could earn their respect, and it wouldn't be because I was a coach. Like, Jiu-Jitsu really changed my attitude towards how I looked at teaching, coaching, learning skills, the tactical application of what life is. Right?
Okay.
It was just an amazing experience.
Crazy. So was that, are you coaching now?
No. Well, COVID's like
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, was your experience in Brazil?
Oh, no.
Where it ended, or okay?
No, yeah.
So keep going. I want a whole shebang.
I was burnt out from rugby, and it put me on the bones of my ass. Like, you got no idea. And I was basically not eating, and I was living in a basement of somebody that gave me an opportunity to, like, hey, we've got a basement here. If you furnish it, you can live there, because I had no money.
Yeah. Did you feel exhausted because you were flying all over the world and getting turned down for these different positions, or what do you think caused that level of exhaustion?
I think it was failure had got the best of me.
Sure.
For once in my life, and because I was so attached to things that I couldn't control. But that's been my greatest lesson. Like, if you can't control, you just gotta let it go, right? Like, But if you let it go with resentment, you won't be able to see if it comes back again, so you could take advantage of the opportunity. So yeah, it was a great instigator of teaching me the greatest lessons in my life, that hardship. And I wouldn't change it for anything. Like, I had to do some pretty shitty things in order to survive.
It sucked at the time, but in retrospect,
Yeah.
That's what made the journey.
Yeah, like, talk about having no messages, like, apart from shelter, and not even have food, or not really having community.
Mm-hmm.
The guys from Jiu-Jitsu literally, like, saved my life at that time. And I could have, like, called the phone, like, I could have called my family and said, hey, get me out here, and they would have done it at a drop of a hat. But I was like, I knew that there was something beyond this, like, beyond these difficulties, beyond all the bullshit. There was something there.
What do you think you were searching for, or what were you hoping you were going to find? Because, like you said, you're in more or less a shitty situation. You don't have any comforts. You're missing, a lot of the needs that an average person would want, and the securities and the stabilities and the certainties. And here you are, all over, going all over the world in foreign places, meeting people you don't know. Don't know where your next dollar's going to come from. All these different things. What do you think it was you were really searching for?
I don't know if I was searching for it, or it was searching for me. Like, I don't know what that was, but there was just something inside me that said, don't stop. Just keep going. And, like, everything from, like, not eating enough and training too much. But I would turn up and I'd get my ass kicked and go home. I can't answer that question. But there's something inside you and inside every person that when it gets really, really tough, you know who you are.
That's exactly what I wanted to focus on.
Okay.
Is the fact that, and another reason why I'm having you on the show, because that in and of itself was extraordinary to me, where 99.9% of the people in that situation, well, they probably wouldn't even be in that situation to begin with, but if they were in that situation, they would have shot back home to mommy and daddy. Because that definitely would have been the easier thing to do. And I think, even though you didn't necessarily know what you were doing there per se, you stuck it out. And whether or not you knew you were on this kind of journey of self-exploration and self-discovery at the time, whether or not you knew that is irrelevant. The fact that you stayed and, as you said, you really started to understand who you were as a person. I mean, I think very few people are in an environment or put themselves in a situation to really figure out, you know, what they're made of, and to be in that situation where every comfort is stripped from you. I mean, that's just a rare and extraordinary experience. And I think that's super cool. And
Bro, I'll do it again tomorrow, man. Like,
yeah,
I'm down. Like, let's go.
I mean, you know, you're definitely a free spirit. The ability to travel all over the world, be comfortable and be confident. And you know, you had the confidence come up to me, and we started chatting. And coincidentally, I was starting to tell my cousin about you. I was like, because he's an entrepreneur turned leader in a corporate setting. I was like, you gotta meet this guy Theo. I just talked to him, and he's like, oh, is he the New Zealand rugby player? So you have met my cousin in the gym. But anyways, where I'm getting at is just the fact that your ability to just be in environments and to survive is, in my eyes, you know, respectable. I think that's really cool, because I think that's hitting home for me a little more than probably a lot of viewers listening are noticing, is because I'm kind of at these crossroads where I'm thinking about moving out of Minnesota for the very first time, and it's like, I have all these connections and comforts and freedoms and all this stuff, but there's something for me about just kind of starting back at zero. I wouldn't be starting back at zero, but just kind of like rebuilding. I love the feeling of just building and being in new environments, and like you, trying to figure out who I am even more and more and more. And so I've been going through these kind of situations and conversations in my head, trying to figure out, should I make the move? Should I not make the move? If I stay, it's gonna be great. If I leave, I don't know if it will be great, but I would like to figure it out. Like, it's just, I'm just rambling here, but I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, like your ability to go from here to there, to there, to there, Kenya, Australia, New Zealand, Kansas, did you say Atlanta, Rio? It's like all over the place. I'm like, I'm just trying to think about going to Miami for a year.
Do you remember the first time that you got your driver's license?
I do.
When's the first time you drove alone?
With my license?
Okay, yeah, or maybe without.
The first time I drove alone, I mean...
Well, hang on, just about that feeling, right? Like, you drive from here to here, but like, now you would drive 1,000 times further than that first destination.
Right.
And like, people often say, you know, we don't know how you do it. For me, getting on a plane, like, I get on a plane when I come to Minnesota, I literally live within 6 blocks of here. You know, the cafe down the street, the supermarket up the road, like, I don't really go anywhere. I don't really need to, I'm quite happy there. And then I'll get on the plane and I'll go to Brazil. And I live within 6 or 7 blocks of there. There's no difference in you getting on a car and driving down the road.
Right.
Like, it's our brain that creates that fear because I'm so far away and, you know, in a sense, vulnerable. But mate, what's the worst going to happen? What's the worst? Like, the tornado's going to come and get you?
Yeah.
Because it's, you know, like, you're going to be okay.
Right.
Like, you go into Miami, Will Smith's been there and he's still alive, so
exactly.
you're going to be alright.
Yeah, trust me, I'm leaning. It's definitely gonna happen. It's just I've already made the decision, the commitment that it's gonna happen. I've just been having these conversations, and it's like a timing thing, and it's like I feel like I've worked so hard to kind of build relationships and do the things that I wanted to do here in Minneapolis, and I'm like, am I gonna cut that too short? And so. It's just this needle going back and forth, but trust me, at the end of the day, I will be, you know, where I want to be. I'm going to be in Miami within the year. It would have been October if it wasn't for COVID right now.
Yeah. I think, you know, giving, like, your level of influence here, like, giving space to the people that you coexist with now, only gives them more gratitude for who you are when you come back.
Interesting, yeah.
Like, trust yourself and trust your capacity. And you have a gift, like, you know, Garrett and I were talking about you the other day, like, you have an enormous gift to give people.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, your ability to talk and to do these things, like, you're for the world, mate. You're not for Minnesota in a little box. Like, there's bigger things for you, you know? So,
thank you, I appreciate that. That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's continue to go down your coaching journey, because again, I want to get to the point where you're doing these leadership consultings for I won't spill the beans, so I'll just zip right there. But yeah, let's continue down your coaching and then segue into your leadership, and then of course the big reveal of what's
coming
in
up.
September.
Yeah. Well, basically, I was in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then I got offered some opportunities to be coaching up here in the USA, and some of that was through the military. And so while that was happening, there was a couple of other opportunities, and so I'd fly up all the way from Brazil, come up here and coach for 3 or 4 weeks.
So was it coaching rugby for like a military team?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. And then coaching with other clubs and other entities here as well. And that went pretty well for the first couple of years, and then through my contact in Kenya, which is Chris Brown from the USA Sevens now, I was like, mate, I've just been learning jiu-jitsu, and I have like these innovative ways about contact to ground time, how long it takes to get a player onto the ground. When a player hits the ground, what are their roles? What can they do to be 1% better?
Yeah.
As soon as I said 1% better, he was like, okay, mate, well, you're going to have a look at this. He gave me the opportunity to go and start working with the Olympic team there, and that lasted for about 9 months on and off, and I put my heart and soul into what was going on, and there was an opportunity to be at the Olympics.
That's so cool. So was that the 2016 Olympics?
Yeah.
And that was for Kenya?
No, that was for the USA.
Oh, that was for the USA.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
The Kenya kind of rocked itself really early, very late. That was pretty hard going.
So coaching for Team USA in the 2016 Olympics.
Yeah, but there's again, I continually put things in my own way. If not, probably didn't fit the job 100% for what they could have got, and there was other opportunities for them to use other people with different skills, but I was totally okay with it. And I remember, knowing that it wasn't really going to go the way that we all thought it was going to. And I was sitting cross-legged on the field at the Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista, and it was a beautiful sunny day. And I thought that I probably would have been sad, but I was actually, for the first time in my life, I understood what kind of coach that I was and what things really resonated with me. And I was totally fine. I got on a plane and went to Belgium of all places, and ended up living in Portugal, and then I came back here to do some more stuff with the military, and then Corona hit. And then when Corona hit, it launched me back to New Zealand after being away for 17 years. I had to reconnect with my family, which was an amazing experience because they never knew who I was.
Interesting. So when you say you reconnected 17 years later, was it, and you said during COVID, so was it, did you fly back right when COVID was hitting and you were able to make it across, or were you just connecting via virtually?
There was no going back to Portugal because Portugal was a level 4 lockdown.
Okay.
And then I was a New Zealand citizen, and it was, and I had to see my family. And I mean, I was talking to the person responsible for my flights, and they were like, "Wow, where do you want to go?" I was like, "Go back to New Zealand." And then, "Okay, you fly out in 3 hours." So I got on the plane and got back to New Zealand, and it was hugely humbling to feel the love and the generosity of my family and the support after such a long time. And it was just like, I'm not used to feeling this love, but I love it. It was just like amazing.
So just curious to know. So you're talking about this moment where you got back to your family and you're feeling loved and appreciated and supported.
Yeah.
Do you have flashbacks to when you had that very first game? You're at the dinner table.
Not really those flashbacks of that, because our family's kind of like a little bit spread out, and with COVID, nobody could really get together.
Okay.
Right. But it definitely felt and heard the narratives of when I was a kid. And so like some things, sure enough, in our families and no one's ever perfect, there's some things that you take out of those voices in your head in order to be who you want to be. But then there's those things like little sayings that people have in your family and attitudes. Like my oldest brother has Parkinson's disease and had some problems with his back, and and he's just like every day he's like, stick into the bucket, I've got to bloody win. And and he's getting on a bit now,
Yeah.
and he goes to like his box fit classes, and he goes, and he looks at me sideways, and he's like, well, like, see all these young guys here? Like, I beat them sometimes. Like, he's so power bent on winning.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, that's a narrative I've always had in my life.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was just the greatest journey in the world.
That's awesome. I'm super happy you're able to do that. That's really cool.
So yeah, I think that's to sum up the rugby career part of it. With COVID hitting, there's nothing.
Right.
And I was in lockdown in the garage in New Zealand, and one of the biggest part is developing personal leadership and team leadership is two of my strong areas in rugby now, because of the way I'm formed and my belief about how I think people should be treated, and articulating, talking about timing, observation, all those tools.
Yep.
And I started creating like a manual for that. And that's kind of like put me in that new area that I don't need rugby necessarily to facilitate how I think people should be treated, how I think people should be led, and it just automatically expanded.
And how did it expand? Let's elaborate on that a little bit.
I started writing this manual, and it pulled the shit out of me. Like, it was just so difficult to do. And I even started writing about my life story to justify the manual. And then that became really complicated, just because you imagine, like, you need an anthropologist to follow me around and do all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so then I created I created a character, and his name is Virtutus, and he's a gladiator, and he goes through these trials and tribulations. And I started writing a fictional book about this guy, based on all my different experiences, because that way I could tell it so strongly, and I could do whatever I wanted to do to this person. So I could put him in my position, even shittier positions, and then show people the way that he survived that. And then what are the core ingredients of that survival? He gave me a way to narrate that, all the tools and the lessons that I want to get across.
When did you start writing that book?
About the 22nd of March, about.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
You're cruising.
Mate, I'm smashing. I write for like 4 to 6 hours every day. I write.
Wow. And when is the release date of the book?
I want it to be 1st of September, but it's going to be pushed to October.
Okay.
So I'm going to aim again for the 1st of October, because it's just a bigger process.
Yeah. I mean, either way, that's an incredibly short and fast time frame from March to September or October to write a book. I mean, for me, it would take me forever. I just don't have that gift. But you definitely have it, because I had the privilege of reading, is it called a foreword or a memo?
The prologue.
The prologue, yeah. So I definitely took the time to read that. And I was blown away by your ability to, like, your description. Every sentence is so descriptive, and I don't want to spill the beans, but it was so descriptive. I felt like I was right beside Virtutus in the Coliseum. Like, the way you were describing it, it was just, the detail was unbelievable. And of course, as I'm continuing to read, at the very end it's ... I'm like, oh, I need more. You left me hanging. But I was really, really impressed. I was incredibly impressed with your writing style. And I'm definitely gonna be buying that book immediately. I'm very excited for that.
Thanks, man. And but it hasn't come by myself. Like, it just, as I got out of lockdown, I found a friend of mine, like one of my best friend's wives is a writer, and so she's mentoring me. She goes, "You want to be a writer?" And I was like, "Yeah." So then I drove to her house, and she put me through 3 days of hell, like learning how to write. And she's still mentoring me to this point, right? And so a lot of things that you read is like a combination of the things that I've been learning, and the experiences, and I can't take full credit, because definitely she's influenced me greatly on how I write.
You guys are a rockstar team.
Yeah, and I'm still pulling on those things, right? But the description of, basically how he feels, like, that's how we feel as athletes, as business people. And it's broken down to 3 volumes. So the first volume, the character that you're reading about, is all what happens prior to that state. So we're talking about building a guy up, and then he gets absolutely smashed by the world, but he has some core characteristics. So that's the same as any kind of leader going in blind and having to try and find his way through leadership. Like, and I smashed the dude.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second volume is like, how does he rebuild his confidence as a person first? And then lastly is like, what are the tools and the lessons and what are the pathways that he can provide people for them to be exponentially led? And so it's like 3 volumes of a great process. So what I finished is the first volume. So it's dark.
I love
It's
that.
grutty and gory. It's cool.
So the 3 different volumes, is volume 1 going to be the first book, or is it okay?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I like that approach a lot.
Yeah, and like that book will actually come with a manual.
Okay.
And
With
so-
like tactical
Well,
takeaways.
yeah, like metaphorically. And okay, so if you know this phrase when he says this or these thoughts are leading him to these actions.
Okay.
These actions lead him to these behaviors influences all these catastrophic events that happen to him. Because maybe thinking about this in this particular way is probably not the best way to think about it. It could be thought about like this,
Mm-hmm.
not like this, not like this. And so it actually takes you through the pitfalls of human behavior. It's like really, really cool, man. Like,
I'm really excited. Like I read, before I forget, where can everyone check out your website? Because I visited your website and I read through all that, which was really cool.
Okay, it's virtutis.co.
Okay, how do you spell it?
virtutis.
Okay, .co.
.co. Yeah, because .com was taken.
Sure.
Mongrels, but
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really excited for that. Like I said, I was impressed with the subject, the takeaways, the writing style. It's really, really cool. And I think a lot of people are going to relate to it. First person that comes to mind is definitely that athlete that, spent the first 10, 15, 20, 30 years of their life climbing to the pinnacle of their athletic career and then cut off, whether they got injured or they had to retire just because they're getting too old, whatever it is. I think a lot of people will relate to that. A lot of high school and collegiate and even professional athletes can relate to that long journey of focusing on one thing every single day, becoming a better athlete, and then all of a sudden it's taken away. And then of course, people who aren't athletes but might have gone through a similar journey as a musician or as a salesman. It could be in any facet of life. There's always going to be that journey of reaching a target. You either get there or you fall short. Either way, it's in some way, shape, or form possibly cut off completely or reset, and you have to go back at it again. And it sounds like your book is essentially trying to mirror that experience through this character, Virtutis.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's a great, like we talked about this the other day, like the great American movie, right? Or great success sports story. We have the athlete and then, the drunk coach that sobers up so he can be a coach.
Yeah.
And then he gets this kid and goes, you're going to be the kid that saves this team and we're going to write the story about it. So he chucks them in and he makes them, makes them self-functionable and then this kid controllable. They go through and then they win the game and then the movie ends.
Yeah.
But the movie goes on. And my whole purpose is what happens after that. Like I don't coach players just for that peak. Like I try to always have them remember, like it's a continual pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
And the game doesn't define you. Your business doesn't define you. What defines you is how you treat the people that are closest to you and furthest away from you. And those things are the things that really truly matter.
Right.
What matters is when you walk down the street and someone will come up and say hello because they genuinely like you and they genuinely care for you. It's like money wins or losses.
Yeah.
And virtutus means virtue in Latin.
Okay.
And I created virtutus because I had a problem with the current value systems of today. Because our value systems are always derived from our family unit, our work unit, all these different things, but they're not necessarily really pure. But if I just ask you, mate, be honest, be sincere, show empathy, be the best version of yourself. I don't care where you come from. It doesn't worry who your family is, whether they're good or they're bad. Like how you treat this person right now, how you conduct yourself to get the things that you want with virtue and with stigma, with that backbone. That's what's important. And I tell you what, when you get your $1 million or you win that tournament, you win those Olympics, you win that World Cup, you're going to take that with you forever. It's not something that you can just talk about once. Because what's the use of being an asshole, getting $1 million, winning a fucking gold medal, and then have no one to share it?
Mm-hmm.
As an athlete, I experienced that. As a coach, I experienced that. It's the ultimate form of the living dead. When you're by yourself and you've got nothing to fucking show for it.
Yeah. You're going to impact a lot of people with this book.
Well, mate, just being your mate is pretty good for me. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm really excited to. I mean, I'll for sure, like I said, I'll for sure be reading it and be an advocate of it. But I just want to do whatever I can to help. You know, market it or bring more awareness to you and the book, because I believe in it. I believe in the message. Having gone through experiences that relate to what you're writing about and knowing so many people that have gone through similar paths, I think this book is going to be bestseller. Like I truly believe that. I truly believe that. It's just going to be one of those books that people will be talking about very soon. I'm excited for that.
Mate, I'm just like totally grateful for, like, you are an exceptional person, and I'm blowing smoke at the ass, but I've seen you walking a couple of times down the street, the way that you carry yourself, and just there's the energy that you put off, and you probably never get it on the camera, but mate, you're an exceptional person, and
I appreciate that.
I wish you really well in Miami, and you know, with Fit to Give and all that kind of stuff. Or Give to Fit, which way is it?
Fit to Give.
Fit to Give.
Yeah.
Mate, I just wish you all the success in the world, and whatever I could do to help you, mate.
I appreciate that.
I'm in your corner, brother.
Yeah, of course, likewise. And with your travels, who knows? Maybe you'll end up in Miami.
I'll be there. Yeah. It'll be like, bro,
connecting flight to South America or something.
Yeah.
That's great. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want to dive into a little deeper?
Nah, man,
I want to make sure we're using this time to highlight whatever you want to talk about, because this is your time. It's super important that I don't miss anything.
Mate, like, this is probably the most I've ever talked with anybody external from like a closed group that I've ever talked to, and there's a lot of people that see me but never know me, never know what I do. And I don't think there's much more to actually. There's probably more stories, right? Sure. I could hang out. And there's more tools and lessons and experiences that we could share. But you probably run out of film. Like,
I'm never worried about the length of the podcast because. And here's
that's an age joke, right?
Yeah, but it's an interesting topic and debate, because a lot of people ask me how long are my podcasts, and as I've been doing this over the past year, they started at 30-40 minutes, and then 35 to 45, and then 45 to 55, and it's really a combination of me being more comfortable asking the right questions to extract value to the listener.
Yeah.
And so my belief now is, as long as the content is valuable and we're having a conversation that can have an impact on the viewers and the listeners, I don't care if it's an hour, 2 hours, 9 hours, 20 minutes. For me, it's about extracting the value that I know you have and highlighting and sharing it with everyone that's listening. So that's time-wise. I didn't wear my watch today for that exact reason. But let's switch the script a little bit. This is usually where I have the guests ask me a question or two questions, whatever it may be. It can be about anything, whatever you might be curious about. Again, it could be mindset, it could be entrepreneurship, fitness, athletics, business, whatever it is. Whatever comes out. I'm just here to see if I can answer it decently.
What do you think would be one of the most difficult conversations that you've ever had?
That I've ever had.
You had to instigate to have.
I would say, I'm going to pause and think about that. There's definitely been a couple of tough ones.
Yeah. Would you like another one, and we can?
No. I just want to make sure I pick. I'm going to pick like the top three, and you used the word earlier, vulnerability, and this is something that I'm working on. And so as I paused for a second, I just had an internal debate whether or not I want to share this, but because I'm working on vulnerability, I'll share it. And so my top three hardest conversations One, and I shared this one with you. One was having a really hard conversation with my college coach for soccer. He coached me before college as well. Someone I just respected and admired tremendously, and I still do to this day. Again, the coach that I saw yesterday for the first time in a while. Always looked up to him as a second dad. But I had to have a really hard conversation with him years after I graduated college and just be open and honest about my experience as a collegiate athlete under his realm. And again, it was a combination of things that I held myself accountable for and things that he just wasn't aware of, which again comes back to my own accountability because I should have told him. But that was a really hard conversation for me because he was someone that I look up to so much, and I never wanted to fail, I never wanted to mess up, I never wanted to be in a position of weakness in front of him, and so I never shared some of my feelings with him at the time. And it took me, again, years and years and years to have that impromptu conversation in passing that turned into a 2-hour conversation with him. So that's tough conversation number one. And these are in no particular order. Number two was just having a hard conversation with my ex-wife and having to understand why she wanted a divorce, because we were on separate pages. I was in a marriage that I thought was going great. She was in a marriage that she thought was awful, and so having a conversation that she was no longer happy was definitely
difficult.
So that's tough convo number two, and there's plenty more, but I would say a third one was just when my parents split as well, when I was a teenager. So those are probably top three toughest conversations I've had to be a part of.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing when we ask about those things? Like the tougher conversations are always the things that are closest to us.
Absolutely.
And we can get really distracted by pouring all of that expectation on performance, of being the best businessman, of being the best athlete, of being all these things. But what's really, truly tough are the things that are, our girlfriend, our wife, our family.
People closest to us all the time, yeah.
And if you're not taking care of home, man, it's like done, isn't it?
Right?
What is the thing that gives you, at the moment, presently in your life, the most joy?
For me, a couple of things. Just having a mindset of gratitude. As I was going to say at all times, but I'd be lying if I was grateful at all times, because there's obviously times I'm not thinking about it, but I try and have consistent reminders and to be intentional about setting aside 5, 10, 15 seconds of silence away from all the distractions and say, what am I grateful for in this moment? What was I grateful for yesterday? Well, it could be anything. It could be something I was grateful for 10 years ago, but it's just taking the time to recognize that with all of the chaos and the madness and the traumatic events that are going on in the world right now and in the US and in Minneapolis, it's like, can I highlight something that I'm really grateful for in this moment to help me get through the present time, the rest of this day, tomorrow? Like that right there helps bring joy to me. And a lot of times in the morning, I just am grateful to be able to see. I'm really grateful to be able to get out of bed and actually have functioning limbs and to be able to taste. And I kind of go through this mental checklist. That's one thing I go through every morning is, I'm grateful for the ability to see. I'm grateful to be able to hear. I'm grateful for my family. Like all these little things I go through my mental checklist to make sure I'm grateful, but then again throughout the day. And then the second part to your question is progression. That makes me really happy, but there's times where that gets me in trouble, and I'll explain. So I feel like I'm when I'm I'm firing at all full cylinders. I'm moving fast. I'm making decisions. I have confidence. I'm having great conversations with people. I want to connect with people. I'm excited to get out of bed. I wake up my alarm clock. It doesn't wake me up. When I'm going at that kind of a pace, it's when I feel like I'm progressing in what's most important in my life. Whether it is I'm talking to my family frequently, and so I feel like I'm not neglecting them, and that relationship is trending upward. I'm doing well in my businesses that I own, and those are doing well and having impact on the community that in a way in which I wanted to impact. My relationship with my girlfriend and my personal health and fitness, if those are progressing, I'm super happy. And why I mentioned that sometimes that gets me in trouble is a year, 2-3 years ago, if any one of those buckets drop, it would impact me tremendously, and it would really affect me. And now what I'm learning is that it's okay to give myself a little bit of grace. So a practical example is, I want to feel like I'm closing my deals in sales. If I lose one, that would impact me significantly, because you go through 6, 8, 9, 12 months trying to close one deal, and then you lose it, and then you're like, am I not good enough, or why, and all this stuff. And I don't have that mindset anymore, but that was something that would really impact me. So progression is still something that gets me going and motivates me, but with the self-empathy and grace to myself that it's okay to lose a couple or go backwards in a few. You're gonna be okay, so that's my long-winded answers to your question.
No, I think that's amazing. And with the people that I'm mentoring now, as I gain more insight about these types of things, I use death as like the ultimate of what can happen. And if we think about win or lose, right, we live or we die. But if we think about when we don't get success, like death doesn't care if you're successful or not successful. Like if you don't get something at this point, at this junction doesn't really care about how you feel. We make ourselves feel a particular way. And so in my opinion, it's about who can, as quick as they can, readjust to get on, so when the next opportunity comes, we can go. We won't have that same outcome, right? And it's not necessarily failure. It's just we only have outcomes. It's how we deal with the outcomes.
Right.
Let's try to remove ourselves.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you find joy, mate, because you've got such a perfectionist attitude. A lot like that I do, because like, shit, if my bed's a bit wrong and there's nothing right about it, oh my god.
Right.
So, but it's right.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think just having the self-awareness of what makes you tick and how you operate, and there isn't really a right or wrong. It's just being aware of it and optimizing your habits and your mindset on a daily basis. Because what I would realize, to go back to my example of if I were to go backwards in a certain area or fall short, again, I would kind of dwell on it and it really upset me. But now how I process that is, it doesn't serve me to boo-hoo for a while and say, dwelling just doesn't get people very far. And that doesn't mean you can't reflect. I think it's important to reflect, learn from it, and continue to move forward. But dwelling without the desire to continue to move forward is not really self-serving to me. And so that's something I've been learning.
And it's like, it brings us full circle, right? So we talked about reverse engineering, and now you've mentioned reflecting. And one of the things I have been writing about is the difference between reflection and reverse engineering. If we talk about reflecting, we reflect on the whole experience, how we think and how we feel, how we reacted, how we behaved. But if we reverse engineer, just saying those words, to reverse engineer, almost gives us like an architectural mind frame about the problem that we faced. And so quite often when I'm mentoring people, I'm saying, can you please reverse engineer what happened? No, I'm not asking for your emotions. I'm just asking for the facts. And like, we will deal with the emotions over here when we want to reflect. If we need to reflect, first we do it. If we need to reverse engineer, we do it. The difference between the two, I think, is really important.
I like that a lot.
I
like that a lot. That's great.
And I think like probably having the ability for us to, what we say is so easy, right? And this is kind of what I'm trying to cut to the crust of with a lot of things in the book, is that we can't just change the nature of who we are and how we feel. We have to breed ourselves into it. We have to like give ourselves the experience to see that we can have change. And one of those things is find something that you are going to suck at and go and do it with the best possible attitude. Maybe find the worst teacher and try and learn something from them. Like fail continuously, but really have a good attitude about it the whole way through. And make sure it's something that you're not attached to, that doesn't influence your ego. And then step 2 would be go and get something that means something moderately to you, and try and do the same process without feeling bad about yourself. And then the third thing is find something that means so much to you, but try to do it in a way with the best attitude, to forgive yourself, like breed yourself into this ability to be able to live this way, because you can't just do it.
Right.
And I don't want to bullshit anyone, like nobody. Like, you know, we need to take baby steps to have that kind of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to suffer, you know, like, you don't have to suffer to get the information.
Powerful. That's really, really powerful.
I've suffered for a lot of people now. I don't need to suffer. Other people don't need to suffer now.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was willing. Yes,
Right. Yeah, someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
Let's end with this, Theo. How do you want to be remembered?
For this moment, like, I think as a just person. You know, William Wallace had a quote, and it was, "A sudden death of a man who is just doesn't lessen his merits if he dies thus." And so ultimately my whole pursuit is to reduce the amount of regret and resentment that the people that I lead or that I'm together in a family or in a team with, to reduce the amount of resentment that people feel about the experiences that we have together. Like how I want to be remembered is someone that is just, someone that has merit, that gave meaning to the greater things in life, or the simplest things. Like, and if someone could think about me and just smile, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's probably looking at my whole life and tipping the scales back to more happiness rather than people with resentment. Because I can never take back the lives that I've influenced that unfortunately we've lost. And lost in so many ways. If it's not death, it's drugs, or it's addiction, it's something. So how I'd like to be remembered is just like someone thinking of me in a pleasant form would be just amazing.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, based off of what I have observed and just interacting with you, I think you're already, fulfilling that legacy. I think when you interact with people, it's super special. And I think a lot of people that you've come across would agree that you definitely have that just little magical, I don't know what it is, just something, your ability to connect with people, complete strangers. You have that ability, and I think you will be remembered as a just man.
I hope so, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's wrap up here. Share again the title of your book that will be coming out in October 2020, and then the website URL as well.
Okay, it's called Virtutis, and it's VIRTUIS, and .co.
There we go.
That's us.
There we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Theo Bennett, thank you so much for being on the show. For those of you who aren't currently following or subscribing, you can check us out on YouTube at the Not So Fucking Ordinary Show, and then of course myself on all the social media platforms, TJ Haag. Theo, thank you so much, man. This was a real pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
And where did you get those apps from, by the way?